On behalf of the board of the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust, as well as its staff, I welcome you all to the first event in Drayton Hall's 2015 Distinguished Speaker Series. It's wonderful to see such a turnout, and it's a great problem to have. Standing room only. Welcome. Before beginning, I want to call your attention to the series of slides that you're seeing on screen tonight. A variety of themes and topics that all illustrate the wonderful breadth of research and preservation that's going on at Drayton Hall tonight when coupled with the presentation this evening. From the furniture that's been conserved and is on display in Colonial Williamsburg, it's a fraction of our collection, but I think it proudly illustrates we have stuff. It is more than a house, and there's much more that we have on site and within museums in town. To the 3D modeling that you see here, wonderful to be able to virtually capture, restore, and eventually refurnish Drayton Hall in the 18th and 19th centuries. The landscape in which we're investing serious capital into stabilizing and interpreting that. And all of this could not be done without partnerships from Colonial Williamsburg, I'm just going to mention a few, right down to our very own Charleston Library Society. There are a pair of images of Governor John Drayton's view of South Carolina. That is on exhibit at the Charleston Library Society. It's well worth a visit. It's recently been conserved through the generosity of the Almeidas. Tonight, first I want to start off by thanking all the supporters that make this type of program possible. Thank you to our current friends of Drayton Hall, as well as our donors, and I strongly encourage our guests that are not part of the Drayton Hall family through the Friends program to become part of this exciting journey. I'd be happy to talk with you as well as our development staff, Steve Mount and Tara White. In addition to the wonderful friends of Drayton Hall and donors that are making this event happy, I want to extend appreciation to the Francis Marion Hotel, which is underwriting the 2015 series with accommodations for our out-of-town speakers and the reception we enjoyed before the program. By extension, thank you goes to Steve and Wendy Dopp for facilitating this sponsorship. It's now that crucial time for me to ask you to silence your mobile devices. Remember that the men's bathroom is located on the first floor, down below the hall, and one level down on the landing of the stairs is the women's restroom. So in 1974, brothers Charles and Frank Drayton momentously decided to sell Drayton Hall to the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the state of South Carolina after 7 succeeding generations of ownership by the Drayton family. What prompted them to do so? What are Charles Drayton's present thoughts about this fateful decision? What are the thoughts of other descendants, both from the Drayton family and from the African American community, whose ancestors had also lived there for generations? How does its preservation factor into their families' lives today? What does Drayton Hall mean to younger generations? Moderated by George W. McDaniel, President and Executive Director of the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust, all of these questions will be answered by the 7 descendants of the Drayton Hall plantation here tonight. Together, these descendants represent over 3 centuries of Charleston's history, enabling this session to connect the past with the present. Without further ado, George.
Good, I'm delighted to be here, and I just appreciate so much this outstanding turnout. This is just outstanding. I think it's just such a wonderful vote of support for the history of Drayton Hall, and also just for this new venture, this Drayton Hall Preservation Trust. This is new for us. You may have read about it in the papers, and you'll be hearing more about it later, but just appreciate so much your wonderful support. And there's several things I just wanted to say. We forgot, Drayton Hall is a significant place, and as you well know, buildings don't preserve buildings, people do. People have to step up and make that decision. And members of the Drayton family stepped up and made that decision. But it didn't stop in 1974 with preservation of history. It's ongoing. And members of the Drayton family and descendants of the African American community at Drayton Hall have continued to step up on behalf of preserving that history. And that's what makes tonight possible. So I want to salute all the descendants of Drayton Hall. We have just a few participating tonight in this panel discussion, but I want to ask all the descendants of Drayton Hall to please stand up and be recognized. Wonderful. It's you that's really made this, made evenings like this possible. And we began this kind of program at the statewide preservation conference in Columbia, South Carolina. And we got very good reviews from that. And then we did it again at the National Trust Conference in Savannah. And it's the first time that the National Trust had ever done anything like this with descendants. And now we're doing it here. So this is a real important moment, I think. It's a harbinger, I think, of things to come from the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust. I want to begin with a videotape that we've done that also is a harbinger of things to come, because it's the combination of people and place that makes Drayton Hall and other historic sites so special. This is a videotape that was produced by Jay Millard, who couldn't be with us tonight. He's out in New York, but lives here part-time in Charleston, and has won Emmy Awards and Peabody Awards for his work. And also you'll see the Drayton descendants who are participating in it. And so I want to begin that forthwith. And this was, we did maybe 15 hours of oral history interviews. And so we've called that down to 15 minutes that you're going to see today. But what we hope to do in the future, as part of this new plan for Drayton Hall, is to take these oral histories that you see connected with place, put those on mobile apps or on our websites or other things, so you can tour Drayton Hall, visit places at Drayton Hall, and hear stories and recollections from people who remember those places, or from people who are descendants who may not live there, but who have questions to ask, would love to hear stories about that place. And that's what this videotape is going to be about.
I am connected to Drayton Hall via my ancestors. And I say ancestors because it's a long line of them. But I am the granddaughter of Willis Johnson Sr., who was born here at Drayton Hall as a free man. His parents were slaves, but he was free.
My connection to Drayton Hall is I am a descendant from Catherine Bowings, who was my great-grandmother, Willis Johnson Sr., who was my grandfather. They were born here at Drayton Hall. And I knew of Drayton Hall from a little child. My mother, of course, and uncles, they visited Drayton Hall when they were children and played here with Richmond Bowings, our cousin. And in the 1970s, when Richmond returned back to Charleston, he invited me to come here. And that was my first time and my first visit to Drayton Hall. And as I walk on the grounds, I felt the spirits of my ancestors. And it still lives with me. When I come here, I can always feel Catherine Bowings, can always feel Willis Johnson Sr., and I know that I am a part of this place and that they are a part of this place spiritually as well. I would like to know, what did my grandfather did in the big house? Did he help with the brick masonry? Did he help build those beautiful designs as you go up the staircases. That is really beautiful, the designs and how the staircases designed there, the step. My grandmother she cooked, she cleaned, she helped to raise the children. I would like to know, what did Friday Johnson do? And was he the man that brought the wood in to keep the fire, to keep them warm, to start the breakfast in the morning? And the quilts and the bedding were how did they make it? They sewed. The clothing helped to iron. And how did you operate the big house? Who did the work and how was it done?
At the Ashley River near Drayton Hall, if I were to look across the waters, some questions would come to mind. And some of these may be, did anyone attempt to swim across this river to escape? And if so, did they make it? Were they caught? Were they brought back? And something else that might come to mind, and looking across that Ashley River near Drayton Hall, were any of these people who attempted to escape were directly related to me?
Well, I'm the sixth Charles, from the son of John Drayton, his second son, Charles. I'm the sixth. It means just about everything to me. It's something that I didn't realize was so wonderful when I was growing up. And it wasn't until later that I began to appreciate the past of Drayton Hall and the present and hopefully the future. It means an awful lot to me.
Drayton Hall means to me my ancestors who are buried here and interred on this property. Drayton Hall means to me Richmond Bowens, Willis Johnson, Catherine Bowens, and Caesar Bowens.
Of course, I remember Richmond quite well. Mm-hmm. And Richmond I consider a very, very dear friend of mine. Mm-hmm. We sort of grew up together. Mm-hmm. He's a little older than I, but nevertheless, he was here the whole time I was here and knew him the whole time. He's always been a part of the place. I think one of the positive things that's happened of recent years is the recognition of the graveyard. And the gate that's been put up there and the love that has gone into getting together there and meeting. I think that was a tremendously positive step.
The cemetery is the place where the history is, and also the history of where you are tells the story about the persons who lay to rest at the cemetery. And my ancestors did live here. My ancestors were born here, and I am a descendant, and I feel like I am also a part of Drayton Hall.
Definitely you are.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would like to say to you that you are my good friend, that you are just as much a part of Drayton Hall as I am and my family is.
My final thoughts is I would like for Drayton Hall to extend itself to have a retreat with the other plantations up and down the avenue here, Middleton, Magnolia, and any other plantations who might be within this proximity, and come and meet together and let's have a retreat and explain our feelings to each other. And probably this will release some of the tension, and it probably could move on to other areas as well.
I couldn't agree with more. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think a lot of it could begin with what we've already discussed, and that is having an interpretive center. And in that interpretive center, have a program that goes into this very same thought.
My family sometimes question, why do you folks keep going back to Drayton Hall? Wasn't the plantation? Yes. Were your ancestors enslaved? Yes. But one must know where you came from in order to know where you're going. And how do you get that? You have to go back into your history, our ancestors. So that's why it's now we have more people who are willing to do what we're doing. And we're not, because again, slavery, no glory. But if you take this out of one's life with the ancestors, how are you going to move on? You know, there's so much that you get out of this. And in my doing it, I have had some of my friends and relatives that are now coming on board. I said, don't look at it as it was slavery and I don't want anything ever to do with it again. No, we don't want it to happen again. But we do have to, we can't leave our ancestors behind. And I know that my ancestors, the Bowens, the Johnsons, have left a legacy here at Drayton Hall. And I intend to see that go on and pass this on to the next generation.
Sitting here in this cemetery this morning, I'm thinking about all those who live and suffered hard tasks here in this place. Some live a long life, some probably live a short life, but I really see so many graves are here that let me know that they were loved and cared for by friends and loved ones. And I'm sure as we sit here today, it reminds me of my destiny one day. And let me know that one day I too will be among the silent group in some cemetery. That's a part of my testimony for those who are gone on this morning. No marker, nothing to let you know who's there. But one thing we can be assured of, God knows who's in these spaces where there's no markers. And may God bless, and may God keep them forever in His care. And I know one day, sooner or later, if Bina is out here somewhere, we'll meet again. Yes.
This is what this cemetery is speaking to me. I've gone through many things. I've gone through many trials, but I didn't give up. So I'm going to go on, and I'm going to press. I'm going to meet that precious Savior that guided me through everything I had to go through in spite of. So as I sit in the cemetery, it's like I could, you know, in some sense you can hear them saying to you, go on. And then they could have thought about a song like, precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on with your light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me on. For when my way draws near and the night is near, and when my life is all, it's almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call. Take my hand unless I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me on. So as I sit here right now, there are tears in my eyes, because there are many bodies here that don't have anyone to talk about them and to talk about their history. But those that have that connection, that can come and share, that's very important for others to know, so that they can plight their course and say, even though they were in slavery, and slavery did happen, and it wasn't a good thing, but I'm not going to let it get me down, because I know that just like it says in Philippians 4:13, we can do all things. No matter what happens in life, we can learn from the failures. And I believe America is learning from the failures and saying, we want to correct what was done in the past, now in the future.
It's all right. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glory of my God and King, the triumph of His grace. My gracious Master and my King, assist me to proclaim, to spread through all the earth abroad the glory of His name.
I'd like to recognize now the participants, Charlie Drayton, and then Rebecca and Catherine, Rebecca Campbell and Catherine Braxton, and the rest of Lorraine White. Lorraine White there. Thank you so much. Now what I'd like to do now is to welcome all of the Drayton Hall descendants. If you please come join us, and we're going to and if we'll come up here to the front now and take our seats. And if you can bring Charlie, right? Okay, let me just quickly, by way of introducing our wonderful panel. Of course, there's none other than Charlie Drayton here. We're just so delighted that you could be with us. What a wonderful treat for you to be with us. Braxton, and then we'll jump ahead to her sister, Rebecca Campbell, and they are Bowens descendants. They're cousins of Richmond Bowens, and according to their family's oral histories, their ancestors came over with the Draytons from Barbados in the 1670s. So you're seeing here in front of you 3 centuries of American. And then in generational lines, we have Charles Haywood Drayton here, who is the grandson of Charlie, and next to him is Chad Drayton, Charlie's son, and then Rebecca, and then Frank Drayton, whose father, Frank, was the brother of Charlie Drayton, and it was those two brothers who made the decision to see that Drayton Hall was preserved for the future and to pass it on to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And then next to them, and next is Annie Myers. And in the videotape you heard about the wonderful man Richmond Bowens, who was a real griot, who helped us so much to understand Drayton Hall. And Annie is Richmond Bowens' niece. So her ancestry goes back, according to oral history, to that time period too, 1670s with the Draytons. And then at the end of the table over there is Shelby Nelson, who is another of Charles Drayton's grandson, and whose mother, Ann Nelson, is with us here on the front row. So, thank you so much. Okay, and we also have some other members of the Bowens family, I believe, who came in. Good. Good. Glad to have you here. Are there any other Drayton Hall descendants here? Okay, good. We're glad to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to ask just one or two questions, and then I'm going to throw it open to the audience. Given the number of panelists that we have, we'll be here till 10 o'clock if every panelist asks a question. So if there's a question you'd like to ask to one or two panelists, let me know. And if there's not, then I'll just ask one or two, or just ask for them to respond so we can move along. We've got so many people, I'm sure they'll have lots of questions, and we want to hear from you because this is your opportunity to hear from Drayton Hall descendants. So let me ask first, Charlie, I want to ask you, and then a follow-up question to Frank as well. Could you describe your decision to sell Drayton Hall after 7 succeeding generations? What happened, and were there any other options other than preservation? And we can move this microphone over here so it'd be easy to hear. Okay.
I guess the only other option was to sell it outright. We never put it on the market, but I didn't. It was obvious it was available. And I did get a couple of phone calls and was offered a sum considerably more than what we got from the National Trust. But when I asked, what are your plans? They said, Drayton Hall will be the clubhouse for the golf course. No way. It was a tough decision to make, but I think we made it right.
Could you continue a little bit further and tell about your thoughts about passing it on to the state of South Carolina and to Drayton Hall after 7 succeeding generations of ownership? What were your thoughts about that?
I'm sorry, I'm so deaf. Do I? That's you, I'm not here.
Yeah, right, yeah. What were you thinking of?
I don't know what I was thinking about, but I do know what I'm thinking about now. The right decision. And I think the National Trust has done a wonderful, superb job. I don't know how it could have come out any better.
Bravo. What were some of the thoughts of your father towards the sale of Drayton Hall, and then also the after effects as well, like you parted with from 7 generations?
Well, I know I was not here in Charleston. I was in the service at the time, but talked many times with my father and mother, and when I came home, they knew it was a tough decision, but they knew it was the best decision to make. We had some vandalism out there, and knew that not good things were going to happen to Drayton Hall if it was immediately preserved. And really just echo what Charles said, that it was a hard decision, but a very wise decision that the family made to do this.
And what does it feel like coming back to Drayton Hall now after these years?
George, I've had the question asked, why do you go back out there? Don't you hate going back out there? No, every time I go out there, I feel just moved right down the alley of oaks, and I always see something different every time I go, and just get a great feeling of some childhood memories of when I was out there, and as I said, every time I go, it's a wonderful experience. I have no regrets whatsoever. The family did it.
Thank you. Let's go down the line, and if you could, Catherine, begin with you. If you could just tell briefly, what does Drayton Hall mean to you today?
Well,
and I'll ask the same question that when you answer, then just rather than I repeat it, just go down the line. And Charles and Chad.
Well, Drayton Hall means my ancestors. Drayton Hall is where I had roots. My family, fortunately, coming to the Low Country, were not placed on the selling block as slaves. They came with a family and remained a family. And for that, I'm grateful. We weren't separated. My great-great-grandparents were not separated, and the children were all together. And because of that, we have this connection. And our family stayed at Drayton Hall, worked, died there, and are buried there. And they are buried at Drayton Hall. So we have to maintain this contact. Drayton Hall means much to me. And for that, I'm most grateful.
I would tend to echo Catherine's sentiment as to Drayton Hall is kind of an anchor for me, my family, and who we are as people. And the why of that is sort of hard to grasp around, but there's something about being there that is unique to me. So I really can't put it in any other words, other than to say that it matters somewhere deep in my core.
Same question. How much time do I have? I was kind of prepped on this question last night. And Drayton Hall means a lot to me in different ways and at different times. When I was a kid, it was a country place. I'd go out there with my family, just be dropped off and run in the woods. Later on, as I was a little bit older, I've got some time. When my sister's party was there, I'm 17 years old, and I have a friend, Chipper Allen, who happens to be in the audience. And I'll never forget this. Nobody paid any attention to us. We were 17, but we were able to get a little bit of liquor and standing outside, having a drink of bourbon. I have to say, I couldn't stand it. But I remember looking up at the house and the candle lights, and it was 17-year-old. I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. So that's what Drayton Hall meant to me then. As we got to the point where we were selling, I was very angry and very upset. And it took me maybe 10, 15 years before I got over it. And I want to thank George for connecting me and my family back to Drayton Hall. Catherine, Rebecca, with you, the audience, and to me, today, Drayton Hall is about connecting people back together. And I think that's the most important thing I have learned in the latter part of my life, is the connections. There's so much to learn, so many more things to learn. We learn everything. We learn new things almost daily out there, and it's just really a special place to me. Thank you.
Drayton Hall means to me spiritual. I'm a very spiritual person. My first time there, I set foot on that
Drayton Hall, I felt the spirit of my ancestors running through my body, seemingly like we made contact, seeming like I've been here during their time in the centuries. And it just was a different feeling. And I have never visited a plantation before. And hey, this is a plantation, and I'm here. I walked and I talked with Richmond, and we communicated, and he told me the story about the family. And now I can appreciate it because we have a genealogist, Tony Carrier, who is doing the studies on the Bowens family. And it's so easy for her to get the roots of this family. The connections are so easy, and I have friends and relatives. We want to study our family. How do you get all this information? But we were settled at one location when we landed, when my ancestors came to Charleston. And that was appreciated from the Drayton family to have us as one family, connected. And here are these generations behind have the appreciation of knowing all Caesar Bowens, Catherine Bowens, Willis Johnson, which was my grandfather, who left Drayton Hall and came to Charleston in the peninsula and owned his home. So we laugh all the time about it with George. I said, well, how did my grandfather got the money to purchase the home? I said, my answer is, he stole the money from the Draytons. He got his payback. And he went into Charleston, walked across the Ashley River, and went right into the peninsula of Charleston and purchased a home. Well, later on, the genealogist found out that was not true. She asked us, do you all remember any relatives in your family named Violet Washington? I said, I heard my grandfather talking about her, but I don't know the relationship. She said, well, that was your grandfather's aunt. And she owned the house at 33 Wall Street, and she and her husband deeded 33 Wall Street to Willis Johnson. That's how he obtained that house. So I highly appreciate the Drayton spine bringing my ancestors to Charleston, bringing them to Drayton Hall, and also, but my grandfather was fortunate. He left from that house, he bought another house. He bought 4 houses in the peninsula. Also, they taught him economics. We really appreciate being with the Drayton family. This, the descendants of today, that we have networked together, we travel together, we eat together, we sing together. We have a great time wherever we go, Savannah, wherever we go. With the younger generation, I'm 79, soon will be 80 May 2nd, and imagine being with these younger generations, having a great time. They take care of me.
What Drayton Hall means to me. Before my uncle moved back to Charleston, I really had some negative thoughts about Drayton Hall, being that it was a plantation and that my ancestors were slaves. And I just never really got a real feeling of Drayton Hall, because I remember going up there and traveling near the house where my grandfather never lived, and my mother and my uncles and aunts. And it wasn't until Richmond came back to Charleston, and I visited Drayton with him. And I talked with him and I walked with him. and he would talk about all the good times that they had and the things that they did. And he would always talk about Charles Drayton. Everything was Charles Drayton. I had to go and visit Charles Drayton. And I could remember doing this with Charles Drayton. And after a while, seeing the strength that he had and the love that he had for Drayton Hall changed my perception of what Drayton Hall Plantation was all about. It was all about love. It was all about companionship. It was all about making each other happy. And so I really have an appreciation now of Drayton Hall Plantation, knowing that my ancestors were there. They came up there. And they were strong people. They were religious people. And that has traveled on through generations. My goal is to keep my uncle's relationship with Drayton Hall alive. I want to continue to speak and talk about the things that he talked about when he was alive. My goal and my thought is to be able to have a Drayton Hall ancestor descendants reunion where we can all get together, everybody that had people that lived on Drayton Hall Plantation to come together, because we can be working right next to each other and we do not even know that they are Drayton or they are Bowmans. So if we get that reunion together and we can just fellowship and talk and share ideas and just have that bond that my uncle had with Charles Drayton. I would like to have that bond with Shelby, Charles, Frank, and then all the rest of them and their children. So Drayton Hall to me is a stomping ground to show that it started off maybe as a bad situation, but today it has changed. It's a loving situation that we can gather and be grateful for.
Drayton Hall to me, it's really just, I'm so comforted by it because ultimately we're all going to be there. This whole panel is going to be there one day together. And we know that, and that makes me happy to know that no matter what I do in this life, I'm going to be there on the banks of that river with this whole panel right here together, and my children, and so on. And in 1974, that wasn't necessarily the case. I actually handed the keys over in '74 to the trust as the 9th generation, and mixed thoughts through my upbringing about that. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. It would come through my mind. But now, and Chad had a really poignant observation. Drayton Hall means things at different times in your life to you as well. And so, for me, I am wholly for what George and the trust has done, and I just couldn't be happier that this is the path that it's on. And getting with Annie and Rebecca and Catherine has really been a huge coming together, and leave them rest. It's a quote that keeps running through my mind is the African American cemetery there. But in the ever-changing of it is comfortable, and the continuity of me being there one day forever, it changes every time you go there. As Frank said, it's different every time he goes, but he gets a smile. And for me, probably my favorite moment in Drayton Hall history was when my mother so kindly paid for my services to Drayton Hall, and I was digging the front of the house one day, doing an archaeological dig. And as we dug deeper on the front right corner, we found a brick and another brick. We went 12 courses deep. I'm like, what the heck is this? We really didn't know. We were stoked. And we started to realize, Carter and we looked at each other, that's the original building before Drayton Hall, from 1710. Probably the oldest house in South Carolina. It's been sitting here for 300 plus years, right under our feet, and we didn't even know it. And so that's when it's bigger than our family. It's bigger than Charleston even. I mean, I think it is a true treasure that will be honored in perpetuity now. So for that, I'm forever grateful to my grandfather, bring it full circle, for making the tough choice, but clearly the only choice. And so we get to do more of this, right? Your family, and let's keep doing this. And I definitely think we need to do a reunion with everybody and make that a tradition. So I'm on that. All right. Thank you all for being here. This is really an impressive gathering.
Thank you so much. We've got a scene from the band right here. Just a few more words, Charles.
All right. First of all, could you please stand up? This is another Bowens.
How you doing? Good evening. And I'm very proud to be here. I don't know if I'm supposed to speak, but I met Mr. Drayton when I started at Bishop Gatson 6 years ago now. And didn't know too much about my history. I would go to family reunions, and being a young woman coming up, you really don't pay attention to family as you're growing up, because you're a child and you do silly things, and things really don't mean that much to you when you're growing up until you realize one day you're going to have to take over. But we hit it off right off the hand. My great-great-grandfather was Russell Bowens, and he had 3 wives. And my grandfather says we don't know who those wives were, but my grandfather's father was Charlie Bowens, and he lived here and he died here. And I'm not too sure where he's buried, but see, I went to a reunion this weekend, Valentine's Day, my husband's family, and I got to see 5 generations of this family. And here I am, a young woman, and I only have 2 generations that I'm aware of. I don't know my whole generations. I'm 45 years old. And I am very blessed this evening to share this tribute with all of you. Thank you.
One quickie. Last Wednesday, we had a little meeting, gathering just to see how things would go. And George very carefully pointed out that time was going to be a problem. I said, well, I hope nobody asked me what my thoughts of Drayton Hall are, because I've got 5 different sections, and each one takes an hour. Good night.
So that's an appropriate 5 hours. Well, let's open it up to the audience now. Okay?
Yes, thank you so much. And I do want to say to everyone, first off, how moving this is, and particularly your story, because, you know, my great-grandparents were serfs. They weren't enslaved, they weren't slaves, but they were definitely a similar situation. They were serfs. I have no idea where they were from. I have no idea where they were buried. There's no place I can go back to be buried with them. My mom and dad are in Arlington. I can't go to join them. I would so much like to be the first member of my family, grace of God, born here in Charleston, who could be buried here. But I'm going to Walterboro, where my wife's family is.
Let's look at it.
Mea culpa. However, I so appreciate your story here tonight. And the question that I would like to ask is, I think one that maybe many people would be interested in. We know that there are several versions of the story why Drayton was not burned in 1865. I would like to hear what you have to say about that.
I tell you, in the interest of time, there are many, many versions of that. And I thought, Carter, where's Carter? Carter, I think that may be on our website somewhere, because these are descendants, and let's talk more about the oral history and sort of recollections about it. This is more of a, we have some scholarship on that kind of question, and the straight answer is we still really don't know the differing accounts of the time. That's a very good question. Let's just hold off on that one. Thank you so much, and I hope this has given you inspiration then to appreciate family history and so forth. That was a moving testimony that you gave. Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah.
When you all have your family reunion, which really sounds like a lot of fun, because I can tell all of you are just really a lot of fun. Can you have it in some ballroom so we can be all up?
We'll see.
Just too good.
Okay, the question, obviously you can hear it in the back, was the question is, this family reunion that's being discussed here sounds like so much fun. Can they have it in a ballroom? So us outsiders can be, outlaws if you will, can be invited and look down and enjoy the fun that this family, that's obviously these descendants are going to have. Great question. And we'll see if we can make that happen, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, question?
Rebecca, you and I have a spiritual connection. I turned 70 on May 2nd.
Good. And they have a spiritual, he and Rebecca have a spiritual connection. He turned, what, 70? You do turn 70 on her same birthday.
I am a visionary.
Did you have a question?
Guys, explain that spiritual connection.
I did.
When you come to Drayton, you get what's the feeling, the aura?
The feeling of...
Excuse me, let me repeat the question. Could she explain again that feeling that she has when she comes to Drayton Hall, when she arrives on the site?
I knew my grandfather, and I remember him talking about Drayton. And I remember my uncle talking about Drayton, how they used to go and play with the Richmond boys, because Richmond and his family, they remained at Drayton Hall after emancipation. My grandfather moved on and left Drayton Hall. My granduncle left and went to Detroit. So therefore, we didn't get a chance to mingle around Drayton Hall until the 70s. And hearing about it as a child, my grandfather died in 1945, so you know. I was 7 years old. I kept records. And so we heard the stories and telling, but Richmond Bowens came back from Chicago and invited me to come to Drayton Hall. I said, Drayton Hall? I heard about it. Okay. When I went, it was growing up, like they said, and needed getting landscaped and done over. And whilst he convinced me, like Annie said, I said, well, I feel something strange here. People that I know, my ancestors are here. My body is beginning to tell me something. I am spiritually a person that belongs here, and I began to get on board and work with Richmond boys. Finally met George, and that took off until today. I forgive the Drayton families for enslaving my ancestors. We must forgive for anything we have done to anyone. If I cannot forgive, then God will not forgive me. So I moved on.
Just to make one thing clear, when freedom came, there were three siblings, Bowen siblings, who remained at Drayton Hall. Caesar Bowens, who is Richmond Bowens, you've heard about, who's Charles Drayton's friend, it's his grandfather, Caesar Bowens. And then John Bowens, their descendants, many descendants of his here in Charleston. And then Catherine Bowens. And Rebecca, and Catherine are descendant of Catherine Bowens, and Catherine Braxton carries Catherine Bowen's name. Her great-grandmother, who was at Drayton Hall, carries that name today. Yeah.
Is there any possibility that Mr. Drayton Sr. could give us 2 or 3 of his favorite vignettes of growing up with Drayton Hall as a part of his youth?
The question is, could you? Okay. The question is, can you hear me okay? The question is, could you give us 2 or 3 stories about your growing up at Drayton Hall?
Well, a little bit, yeah. I grew up at Drayton Hall. Went out there, not frequently, but enough. Spent a couple of weeks out there at a time. But when I was out there as a boy, it didn't mean much to me. It was just a place. But as I got out of school, went to the Navy and came back, it became an entirely different situation. And then when my father passed away, my Aunt Charlotta, we call her Aunt Charlie, took over, and that was an entirely different situation. Then when she died, between the time she died and we sold it to the National Trust, it was another 5 years, which was entirely different. And since the trust has taken over, as I said, I'm not going to spend an hour on each of these sections, but it has meant an awful lot to all of us. And I don't think there's any way that the Drayton family could have survived it, monetarily or any other way. The amount of time, and I hate the word using money, but the money that has been put into Drayton Hall since the National Trust took over is just fantastic. There's no way that we could have had it. So I applaud.
Another question? Yeah, back.
I was wondering, I'm a writer, my father was a historian in Florida, did the Second Seminole War, so I'm very interested in history. But the written word, how much journaling went on with the different generations between the Draytons and the enslaved people with the written word of journals kept that you may have found?
The question is how much survives in terms of written records related to Drayton Hall, both from the enslaved community as well as from the Draytons. The answer to that is that as far as the written records, certainly from the antebellum period, from the colonial and antebellum periods, are from the Drayton family. And they're important documents, especially the records of Charles Drayton, who owned Drayton Hall from about 1780s to 1820. We have extensive plantation journals and letters and other documents related to him, and also some to his father, John Drayton, as well. And we're doing all the more research on those documents as well. And Carter Hudgens, the deputy director who gave the introduction, is just doing, and all the staff here, just doing incredible work in finding new records related to Drayton Hall. So more and more written records are coming to light. And you'll see some of that on our website and in our publications and other things. We're using those. And then in terms of the African American community, in the colonial period and in the antebellum period, the documents that we have there are principally related from the Drayton's point of view. So they're lists of slaves, provisions to slaves, those sorts of things. But certainly no, we don't have any first-hand accounts. We don't know of any runaway slaves who wrote letters back, who have kept journals and so forth, and as happened with other plantations. And in the postbellum period, we're doing a lot of work in terms of African American history. They're using the census reports, the Freedmen's Bureau records, death certificates, marriage certificates. It's amazing what one can find online now, thanks to the internet. But in terms of journals and letters of the Johnson or the Bowens family, Do you have any letters or diaries or journals or anything like that? And this is one of the things that's so important. Excuse me? Oral history. And this is where I think...
Writing down, along with Tony, we are working. She's done all the genealogy study, and we're in the process. And I have taken my DNA. We are working.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. I don't want to talk about it right now.
Yeah. And this is what this kind of work, we hope, in historic preservation encourages. And just like, you know, you were talking about your family. So it doesn't stop now. And history doesn't stop. As David McCullough says, has said, no one lived in the past. No one lived in the past. They lived in their present. They didn't know they were walking around in a quaint past and needing to write letters. They lived in their present. And so that's what we do today. And so 50 years from now, historians are going to be coming back and say, gosh, now we have this evidence, you know, that we've recorded to give us some answers that we didn't have. So that's the kind of work we do in historic preservation right now. Yeah.
George, I think it's pretty remarkable the age of the senior member of our panel. If you don't mind sharing his age with I think you ought to be proud of it.
Okay. Question from your almost son over there is, would you please share with us your age?
I'm 96.
All right.
I do not expect to be here when an interpretive center is built. I'm sorry that I probably will be gone, but I wish to the devil we could get one and get it as soon as possible.
96 going on 21. Other questions? Okay, about Walt?
How does the panel feel about the preservation versus restoration?
Excuse me?
How does the panel feel about preservation versus restoration?
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about the philosophy of Drayton Hall of preservation, showing the change of continuity over time versus restoration to one specific period of time? Do you have any thoughts about that? Charles, you want to answer that?
Sure. I think it's really, it encompasses the entirety of the history by preserving it. Whereas if you were to choose a time to restore to, you would have to pick one time. And so I think that's a simple answer to that question, that this preservation of Drayton Hall allows all of these centuries of history to be promoted and expounded upon and learned about.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
I have a comment. I was looking at, well, my wife was looking at Sunday's papers, and she handed the paper to me, and she told me this is something that you need to read. So I started reading it, and I was like, whoa, I need to be here just to see and find out anything. My name is Jeffrey Bowes. And I'm originally from the Hollywood area, and there's a lot of Bowens out there. And it's something that I wanted to come and find out about and maybe look a little further into it, and just to see. We all need to know where we came from. So I would love to find out, and I was talking to Annie and everyone else about it to see where we can go from there.
Good, thank you so much. Those of you in the back, Jeffrey Bowens, he was saying he came here, he had read, his wife had read about it in the newspaper on Sunday, shared the article with him. He said, gosh, members of the Bowens family, I need to come and want to learn about my family history, and so he's here to learn and become engaged. Yeah.
May I respond to Mr. Bowens? Yes, we spoke before during the reception time. And I suggest I gave him my card.
Good.
And here for business.
Okay.
And I invited him to come to get in touch with us my sister and we own the borough houses downtown in the peninsula of Charleston. And we will set up a meeting to come there and discuss it with you and your family and go through you. You'll be like looking the corners. And so we are going to work on this thing.
Okay, good.
I think we could get a movie out of this. We don't have to ask for any space. We have the space.
And for those of you who heard Rebecca and Catherine and their cousin owned the two houses known as the borough houses, right there, the two single houses at East Bay and Calhoun. And their grandfather, Willis Johnson, came from Drayton Hall, purchased the house on Calhoun in the 1930s, 35, and then their uncle, who was a housewright and excellent carpenter and did a lot of work with the blacksmith Philip Simmons, built the back house as a project. He was a journeyman as a carpenter and housewright, and that was his apprentice piece, if you will. So the back house was built by their uncle. And unfortunately, we didn't know about their uncle, and he passed away in 1998, and I wish we had known about him. But the good news is that this preservation ethic that you've heard from the Drayton family is shared by members of the Bowens family, and they've been working so hard to see that those borough houses have been preserved. They've gotten offers to sell them, but they want to see that they're preserved. They work with Spoleto, they work with the Bossier Festival, they work with other community events, because they want to see in the future that they're preserved for posterity and used for preservation and education purposes through a nonprofit organization.
The front house was built in 1842.
1842. Yeah, Joe?
I just wanted to come back to something that a question was asked earlier about the written tradition.
Yeah.
And something that I thought was really interesting growing up. My grandfather's father was one of the originators of the Preservation Society for Spirituals. You may be familiar with that. And what this was is, and it continues to this day, is preserving the old spirituals from the fields of Drayton Hall. And there's some specific songs directly from Drayton Hall. Honor the Lamb is one of them. That he has the original manuscript that his father wrote of these songs, handwritten from, I think it's about 1912. So there is some written history of that, and it's a beautiful spiritual. And I don't know if you're familiar with Honor the Lamb. I mean, that's something that I grew up hearing my mom sing to me. So there is some of that. That was done 100 years ago by his dad.
Good. And that's, he would say that your father's transcribing the spirituals from Drayton Hall. Honor the Lamb and Pass Me Down, Silver Hut, Trumpet, okay. Any other questions? Okay, we're getting close to closing time. Let me just ask one other question, and I'm just going to go down the line again and try to keep your answers brief in the interest of time. But why are programs like this important? What brought you here tonight? Many other things you do tonight. Why come here, and what do you hope is a takeaway message from the audience tonight?
Well, I consider things such as what we're doing tonight to be part of the healing process. You know the history of slavery and the hurt that those of us on the end that had to be punished and worked without sunrise to sunset. And it leaves some bitterness. And almost sometimes I've heard people describe to the point of hatred. And this has got to stop. Now, we've got this going, and I encourage others to do the same thing, so that let's heal. Let's sit and talk about this. And my sister and I attended similar thing, coming to the table not to have a meal together, but to talk about what happened. They were descendants of the slaveholders and descendants of the enslaved. For a week we talked. A lot of bitterness evaporated. The hatred evaporated.
a time for healing. And not only this situation, but other situations as well. We have got to come together and put this hatred and bitterness behind, set it aside. It is now time to heal, and that's what we're doing.
I would hope that this could become an example that other places of history who have, divergent histories can find a ground to build upon as we have. We've become friends, and I think that's good, and I think that that's the goal of this, and I hope that we can express that to people outside of this room and outside of this area so that this sort of doctrine can be passed out and become a part of the healing of this nation, I guess, if it would be described in such a way.
Well said.
I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier. To me, is where I stand now with Drayton Hall. Drayton Hall to me is a connecting people together on both sides. It's connecting young people through their education programs. It's just a place that, to me, is connecting people. And I think tonight is an example of that.
I'm leaving 2 words.
Speak a little bit closer to the microphone.
I'm leaving 2 words with the group: love and forgive.
As Catherine said, we've got to go back to the past to come to the future, and this is really living history. We have 96 down to whoever the youngest one is. And so I think we got a good representation of oral history that will be passed on for generations to come.
Great, wonderful. Okay. Annie?
Okay, I'm hoping that for those who have not visited Drayton Hall, that they will go and they will feel what we feel when we go there. And those that have visited Drayton Hall, then get a better understanding, because when they walk on the ground, they get that feeling that we get, and they'll look back and say, oh, I remember going to that meeting, listening to Catherine, listening to Rebecca, listening to Frank, and now I can really relate and get a better understanding about what Drayton Hall is all about. And this meeting.
I'm really here only for the reunion. That's why it has to happen. That's why I'm here.
Okay, good. Okay. Charles, if you could, if you put the microphone there, and if I could ask you, what would you, why are you here tonight, and what would be some takeaway messages that you would like for the audience here to take with them?
You ready for my 5-hour speech? Would you repeat the question again?
Okay. What would you like for people to take with them as a message from you?
As a message from me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's been pretty well said by everybody here on the panel. And I can concur with that message that's come across, and I'm going to let everybody figure out what it is.
I'm going to be lucky if I'm on this side of the grass, but it being sharp like that, I tell you, that's wonderful. Well, this has been wonderful, and I also want to encourage all of you to come. We've got the next program on March the 26th. We've heard about from Drayton Hall descendants this time. This is going to be about history of food. Libby O'Connell, who's the chief historian for the History Channel, has written a wonderful book entitled The American Plate, Culinary History in 100 Bites. and she's very good. Looks at his book. We talked about colonial and antebellum foodways as related to Drayton Hall. And then in April, we're going to have a Civil War historian discussing the effects of the war on veterans. That's such a topical issue now, with veterans coming back from not only from Vietnam, but Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth, PTSD and so forth. Historians are going back now looking at what happened to veterans from the Civil War. So always new questions are being asked about history. And for those of you who are not members of Drayton Hall, I really want to encourage you to join. We really need your help. We've got this new organization, the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust. This is a new venture for us, and if you enjoy these kind of programs, we really need your support. And we've got membership forms here. You can take one with you, or you can go online and join as well. But we really want your support as we move into the future, and so we can continue to have these kind of programs. So on behalf of the staff and board of the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I want to salute this wonderful panel to send us to Drayton Hall.